Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today while I draw this Hellebore bouquet with colored pencils. I am using several different brands of colored pencils for this drawing, including Prismacolor, Faber-Castell Polychromos, Caran Luminance, and Derwent Lightfast. I am drawing on something called Rising Museum Mount Board. This is the 2-ply. It's just a really nice, thick, soft paper that I just love. It's my new favorite drawing surface. This entire drawing took me a little over 16 hours in total, and I am doing this demonstration here today in 15 minutes. So as you can see, this is moving along very quickly. I like to watch these time-lapse videos myself because it's just fun to see it unfold so quickly when in reality it's such a painstaking process. It's a process that I really enjoy though, because I can be very detailed and meticulous and take my time. So I have a lot of fun working on these, even the long ones. I just put on an audiobook or a podcast and get to work. So here you can see me starting to work on the leaves, and you'll notice that in the leaves that are already finished, you can see the white lines of the veins. That is where I have indented the paper with a really sharp white Polychromos pencil. I go ahead and indent those in, and then I go over with the greens, and wherever I have indented the paper, the rest of the colored pencil doesn't stick in that area, so those veins really pop out really nicely. It makes it really easy to see them and work around them. And right now, at this point, they are a little bit too dark, a little bit too pronounced. And when I come back through and blend with solvent, I will soften those up a little bit. They'll still be there, but they'll look a lot more natural. So here I'm just coming through with the second layer of pencils, just darkening up some of the shadows and smoothing things out. And now I'm blending with the Gamsol, and you can see how those veins, they'll still be there, but they're just, everything is softening up. The colored pencil pigment is dissolving, and it's turning that colored pencil pigment into something more like paint. Just gives me a really nice smooth base layer or surface to come back over with more layers of pencil, which is what you can see me doing here now. And I come back through on these second layers and just again smooth things out, add a few details, make sure my edges are really nice and sharp and crisp. My goal is to make it look as realistic as possible. I'm using a photo reference for this. I like to draw a photo realistically, but I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm not copying the reference image perfectly. I'm just trying to get it close. I usually start off with the goal of copying it perfectly, but I don't spend the time to actually make that happen, if that makes sense. I want to get it as good as possible without stressing myself out about it. Now you can see me starting to work on some of the flowers. I was using several different colors in these flowers. I was using the Derwent Lightfast purple and also Derwent Lightfast wild lavender and heather. I was using Caran Luminance Ultramarine Pink, I was using Prismacolor Mulberry, Dark Purple, Black Cherry, and Dahlia. And also white. I used a lot of that Prismacolor white pencil. This particular flower that I'm working on right here had so much contrast. So I was using a lot of the Derwent Lightfast Purple, which is a really dark purple, contrasted with some of those really light colors like the wild lavender, the heather, and the ultramarine pink. Oh, I also forgot that's a Polychromos Red Violet. That's another one of the purples that I was using. That Polychromos Red Violet, that's one of my all-time favorite pencils. Actually, a lot of these are. You could see me use the electric eraser to erase up some bits of color here and there, and then go over that with the white pencil just to create that really nice bright contrast. So here I am starting in on the stamens for this large main flower, and I'm using some Prismacolor creams and sands in there. And then I'm also going to be using a little bit of earth green yellowish in the very center. Just making those little circles. I like to draw in the stamens first, always in any flower that I'm working on, and then go around what I have drawn with the main colors of the flower. I just find it a lot easier than trying to save space for those to draw in later. I just think I can get a lot more crisp edges when I do it that way. It also helps to have some of those Polychromos pencils for that, because you can get such nice sharp detail. Lots of nice sharp edges there. They're just a really hard leaded pencil, so they sharpen to a really nice point, and then they hold that point. I like using the different brands of pencils for their different colors that they have available and the different characteristics. It took a couple hours, I think, just to draw that center area. That was one of the hardest parts about this drawing. This was not the easiest drawing in the world for me. Lots of detail in here, and the center area of this flower was one of the hardest parts. And then when I get to the vase wasn't that it was really intricate and detailed. It was just that I don't draw a lot of vases, so I had to kind of figure things out and work through it. For these really bright, very light pink edges of some of these petals, I made sure to have a really solid layer of white pencil down before I came over with any of the colors. That created a little bit of a barrier, and it helps achieve that look of that transparency of those light petals. So I put that white layer of pencil down very first on those sections. The other important thing were these dots, splotches, these markings that were on the petals. I wanted to make sure that they curved in the right direction to give shape to the petals, and they're not just placed here and there. They are in kind of a line, a little bit of a pattern. That's going to help create that 3D effect. Also, getting the center of that petal really dark makes it look a little bit more 3D. It gives it some depth. So now that I blended that with Gamsol, I'm just coming back through and adding my second layers. Typically use very similar colors in the second layers. Sometimes I'll make some color adjustments, but a lot of times I'm just going back over what I've already done, which just makes those second layers are a lot easier than the first few layers. And moving on, you'll notice when I blend with Gamsol, I'm gonna let that dry. I usually wait at least 15 minutes, sometimes more like an hour or so, before I come back over with my second layers. I like to have make sure my paper is really nice and dry. Otherwise, my pencil pigment will kind of dissolve as I'm working if there's still wet Gamsol or wet solvent on the paper. It just kind of crumbles your pencils. So just make sure it's dry. It takes varying amounts of time depending on how much Gamsol you used and what kind of paper you're working on, how absorbent your paper is. I like to work on Strathmore Bristol smooth paper as well, and the Gamsol seems to dry quite a bit faster on that than it does on this paper or the hot press watercolor papers. There's my electric eraser again. That's a new electric eraser for me. It has a tiny little tip on it, and it helps me get these really nice details. So I'm really happy with that new eraser. An electric eraser for me is just an essential tool for colored pencil drawing. Would highly recommend trying one. They're inexpensive and they work great. You can use them in a lot of different techniques. You can put white pencil down first and go over that with color and then pull up some very bright white bits, or you can just start coloring in and pull up some more just lighter areas without it being bright white. A lot of different things you can do there. Adding a little green to the base of that flower. You can see the overlap in these petals. That's another way to make sure you're getting that look of the translucency of the petals, because you can see it gets darker where there's an overlap. And it's just back and forth and back and forth. Definitely a layering process. Just keep working on it until I'm happy with it, basically. And onto the vase, I used a combination of Polychromos and Prismacolor. I used Polychromos Cold Gray 1 and 2 and Prismacolor Cool Gray 10% and 20% for the most part. And then I worked the stems in with several different light colors of green, the gray-green light and pale sage in particular. And this is just a matter of draw what you see. Lots of kind of weird shapes, and I just tried to blend everything out and keep things as blurry as possible. I like to draw detail, so it's hard for me to draw anything that looks a little bit out of focus. It doesn't feel quite right. But I was really happy with the way this one turned out. If you like this drawing and you would like to see a slower version, I have a 5-part video tutorial series over on Patreon. Lots of real-time instruction. One of the flowers, the stamens, and some of the vase are all in real time, and everything else is much slower with voiceover instruction. And there is my finished drawing. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week with another colored pencil drawing. Bye guys!